I need a wife, and you need strong sons, declared the Alpha King to the rejected Omega. She was cast out, packless, worthless, surviving alone in the wild for 3 years after failing to shift on her 18th birthday. He was cursed, the most powerful alpha alive, but every heir he fathered died within weeks. His bloodline was doomed to extinction. Their deal was simple: protection for pregnancy, a cold transaction between a desperate king and an outcast with nothing left to lose. But when ancient vows bind them together, a golden light erupts between them, something that hasn't been seen for 1,000 years. Now pregnant with his child, she discovers the terrifying truth. She wasn't rejected because she was weak. She was rejected because of what she truly is. And someone will kill them all to keep that secret buried. Can a rejected Omega and a cursed Alpha rewrite the laws of fate itself? Or will their forbidden bond destroy everything they're fighting to protect? Before we begin, I invite you to take a breath. This space is for the quiet believers, the ones who know small kindnesses can ripple into something greater. The first rays of dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, but the Omega had no time to admire the sunrise. Her legs burned with exhaustion as she pushed through the thick underbrush of the borderlands. 3 days of running had taken their toll, 3 endless days of staying just ahead of the rogue hunters who pursued her with ruthless determination. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she burst into a clearing, only to skid to a halt. Her heart plummeted. A sheer cliff edge stretched before her, dropping away into a misty ravine. The sound of heavy footfalls and cruel laughter approached from behind. "Nowhere left to run, little Omega," a gruff voice called out. The rogues emerged from the trees, 5 of them, their eyes gleaming with malice and their clothes stained with the blood of previous victims. She turned to face them, backing up until her heels touched the cliff's edge. If she was going to die, she would do it fighting. Her fingers curled into fists as she dropped into a defensive stance. She might be an Omega, but 3 years of surviving alone had taught her how to be dangerous. The largest rogue stepped forward, a wicked blade glinting in his hand. "Don't worry, we'll make it quick!" A thunderous howl cut through the morning air, followed by the sound of powerful paws striking the earth. The rogue spun around as an enormous patrol burst into the clearing, led by a wolf whose size and presence made the Omega's knees weak. The Alpha King himself, his black fur gleaming like polished obsidian, his golden eyes burning with authority. The rogues scattered like leaves in a storm, their earlier bravado evaporating in the face of true power. 2 didn't make it far. The King's guards took them down with practiced efficiency, but the Omega barely registered their screams. The world was growing dim around the edges, 3 days without rest finally catching up to her. As her legs gave out, she expected to hit the hard ground. Instead, strong arms caught her. The Alpha King had shifted back to human form in time to reach her, and the moment his skin touched hers, an electric jolt passed between them. Her eyes widened in shock, meeting his equally startled gaze before consciousness slipped away entirely. When she next opened her eyes, she found herself in a spacious war tent. Rich furs lined the bed where she lay, and the air was heavy with the scent of leather, wood smoke, and something uniquely male, the Alpha King's personal scent. He sat in a carved wooden chair nearby, watching her with intense calculation in his golden eyes. She pushed herself up carefully, noting that while her clothes had been cleaned, she hadn't been changed out of them, a small mercy that helped her maintain some dignity. The King's presence filled the tent, making it hard to breathe, but she forced herself to meet his gaze steadily. "You've led my patrols on quite a chase these past few days," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "Though I suspect you were more concerned with the rogues than my men." She remained silent, unsure of her standing here. Was she a prisoner, a refugee? The strange spark when he touched her lingered in her memory, making her skin tingle. The King leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "I need a wife," he stated without preamble, the blunt words making her blink in surprise. "And you need strong sons. My bloodline is cursed. No heir survives past 1 moon. You smell of survival despite being packless. Marry me, bear my children, and gain my protection." The Omega stared at him, mind racing. His proposal was more like a business transaction than a romantic overture, but the implications were staggering. Marriage to an Alpha King would mean safety, security, and status she'd never dreamed of since being cast out of her birth pack. But his words about a curse sent a chill down her spine. What dark fate had claimed his previous heirs? And what would happen to her if she failed to break this curse? She looked at him, truly looked at him. Power radiated from his massive frame, and his face was handsome in a harsh way, all sharp angles and stern authority. But there was something else in his eyes, something that spoke of hidden depths beneath his cold exterior. The choice lay before her like a double-edged sword. Face death in the wilderness as a lone wolf, or bind herself to this dangerous king and his cursed bloodline. Neither option promised an easy path, but at least one offered a chance at survival. The Omega studied the Alpha King's face, her mind racing through the implications of his offer. Years of survival had taught her to look for traps, but she also recognized opportunity when it presented itself. The tense, heavy silence stretched between them as he waited with the stillness of a predator, his golden eyes never leaving her face. "I have conditions," she finally said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. A flicker of interest crossed his stern features. "Name them." "I want respect, not just protection. My own private quarters where I can feel safe. And..." She took a deep breath. "I won't be treated like a curse breaker for hire. If your pack whispers or shows disrespect, you deal with it." The king's eyebrows rose slightly, clearly surprised by her backbone. Most Omegas wouldn't dare negotiate with an alpha, let alone a king. "You speak boldly for someone in your position." "My position is that of your future queen and the mother of your children," she countered. "Unless you'd prefer a cowering mate who can't even stand up to pack politics?" A low chuckle rumbled from his chest. "Agreed to all terms. We leave for the palace immediately. The sooner we complete the mating ceremony, the sooner we can work on breaking this curse." Within the hour, they were traveling with his guard contingent. The Omega rode beside the king on a horse provided for her, watching as the landscape changed from wild borderlands to carefully tended territories. When they crested a final hill, she couldn't hold back a gasp. The Alpha King's palace sprawled before them, a massive stone structure that put every pack house she'd ever seen to shame. Ancient towers reached toward the sky, while thick walls spoke of centuries of power and protection. This wasn't just a home, it was a fortress, a seat of power, and now her gilded cage. As they rode through the gates, the hostility was immediate and palpable. Pack members lined the paths, their faces twisted with barely concealed disgust. Whispers followed their procession like poisonous snakes. "Rogue! Cursed Omega! She'll doom us all!" The king's face remained impassive, but she felt his tension in the way his shoulders stiffened. Before they could reach the palace steps, a man stepped forward, tall, well-built, with the bearing of someone used to authority. The Beta, she realized, recognizing the second-in-command rank markers on his clothing. "My king," the Beta said, his voice low and urgent. "A word, please?" The king dismounted, helping her down before turning to his Beta. "Marcus, speak." Marcus glanced at her before leading the king a short distance away. Though they spoke in hushed tones, her enhanced hearing caught fragments of their conversation. "Rushing into this. The pack's concerns. Another cursed union." The king's response was sharp and final. "The decision is made, Marcus. Prepare the throne room for the ceremony tonight." Events moved in a blur after that. She was whisked away by servants who bathed and dressed her in ceremonial robes, then brought to the throne room as night fell. Hundreds of pack members gathered to witness the union, their faces ranging from curious to openly hostile. The ceremony itself was ancient and formal. They stood before the pack as the king recited traditional vows in the old tongue, his voice strong and sure. When she repeated the words, she felt power thrumming through them, something old and wild awakening in response. Then came the marking, the moment when they would bite each other to forge the mating bond. The king's teeth sank into her neck first, and that's when it happened. Golden light erupted between them, a visible cord of energy connecting their bodies. Gasps and murmurs of shock rippled through the crowd. When she completed her marking bite, the golden bond pulsed brighter, sending waves of warmth through her body. This wasn't normal. She'd seen mating ceremonies before, and none had ever manifested a visible bond. The ceremonial mating that followed was clinical and brief, witnessed by the pack's elders as tradition demanded. But throughout it all, that mysterious connection hummed between them, making every touch feel significant, every shared breath heavy with unspoken meaning. Later, a servant led her to her new quarters, rooms that were larger than any home she'd known, decorated in rich fabrics and warm woods. As the door closed behind her, leaving her alone for the first time since dawn, she sank onto the bed and touched the mark on her neck. The golden bond had faded from sight, but she could still feel it, a warm pulse connecting her to the Alpha King. She was no longer a hunted Omega, but survival would require a different kind of strength now. This luxurious room was just another kind of cage, and she had yet to discover what price the king's curse would demand from her. The morning sun filtered through ornate windows as the Omega made her way to breakfast. Her new status as queen, a weight heavier than the formal dress she wore. The great dining hall fell silent as she entered, dozens of eyes tracking her movement to the high table where the Alpha King already sat. Helena, the former favorite for queen, sat among a cluster of high-ranking females. Her beauty was striking, all flowing dark hair and perfect features, but there was nothing attractive about the calculated malice in her smile. The Omega had barely taken her seat when the first accident occurred. Helena's hand slipped, sending a goblet of red wine directly toward the queen's pristine white dress. With reflexes honed by years of survival, the Omega deflected the liquid with a napkin. "Oh, how clumsy of me," Helena simpered, "though I suppose quick reactions are necessary when one can't shift to avoid danger." Titters of laughter rippled through her supporters. The king watched impassively, his golden eyes revealing nothing. "Better clumsy than calculating," the Omega replied smoothly, "though I understand wine-stained clothing is the least of your concerns lately." Helena's smile faltered slightly. "I don't know what you mean." "No? Then perhaps we should discuss your late-night visits to the visiting beta from the Southern Pack, the one who's supposed to be negotiating trade agreements." The Omega took a delicate bite of bread. "I'm sure your mate would be fascinated by those negotiations." Dead silence fell over the table. Helena's face drained of color. The Omega had gambled on the gossip she'd overheard from the servants, and Helena's reaction confirmed everything. "I dot." Helena started, but the Omega wasn't finished. "As queen, I should probably address such breaches of pack protocol, unless, of course, you'd prefer to focus on more important matters than my shifting abilities." The king's lips twitched in what might have been approval. Helena mumbled an excuse and fled the table, her supporters suddenly finding their breakfast very interesting. After the meal, the Omega explored her new home. The palace was a maze of corridors and hidden passages, each turn revealing new wonders. Her wanderings led her to an ancient wooden door, heavy with age and carved with wolf symbols. Inside, she found a vast library, its shelves stretching toward the ceiling and filled with leather-bound volumes. "Not many find their way here on their first day," a creaky voice said. She turned to find an elderly man emerging from between the stacks, his white hair wild and his eyes sharp despite his age. "I'm Thaddeus, keeper of the histories," he introduced himself. "Come to learn about your new pack?" "Among other things," she admitted, "though I doubt there's much written about Omegas who can't shift." Thaddeus's eyes twinkled mysteriously. "You'd be surprised. Sometimes what we think of as weakness is simply power waiting to be understood." He ran his fingers along a shelf. "The old texts speak of many kinds of strength. Not all wolves bare their teeth to show their power." Before she could question him further, a bell chimed somewhere in the palace, and Thaddeus shuffled away between the stacks, leaving her with more questions than answers. That evening, a knock at her chamber door revealed the king. He entered with purpose, carrying a stack of documents. "We need to discuss the trade negotiations with the Southern Pack," he said without preamble. She gestured to a sitting area, and they spent the next hour reviewing proposals and discussing strategy. The king's intelligence matched his strength, and she found herself engaged in the complex dance of pack politics. "Your handling of Helena this morning was interesting," he said finally. "Did I pass your test?" His eyebrows rose. "You knew?" "You're not the type to sit idle unless you're evaluating something," she replied, "though I suspect Helena's indiscretion was news to you." "It was," he admitted. "You've been here one day and already know more about my pack's secrets than I do." "Servants talk, especially to those they think don't matter." He reached out, touching her hand, and the golden bond flared between them instantly, visible, warm, and far more intense than before. They both stared at the manifestation of their connection, neither having expected it. The king withdrew his hand abruptly and stood. "We'll continue this discussion tomorrow," he said, his voice rough. Without another word, he strode from her chambers, leaving her to ponder the growing mystery of their unusual bond. 2 weeks passed like a dance of shadows and sunlight in the palace. The Omega Queen carved her own unique path to respect, not through displays of physical dominance, but through the sharp blade of her mind. Where others might have faltered under the weight of their new position, she flourished in unexpected ways. Pack members began bringing their disputes to her, drawn by her uncanny ability to see through deception and find solutions that left both parties satisfied. She settled land disputes between farmers with clever property divisions, resolved age-old family feuds with diplomatic wisdom, and even managed to negotiate peace between rival merchant families whose conflict had stretched back generations. The Alpha King noticed. More and more frequently, he sought her counsel in his private study, their conversations stretching long into the night. These meetings became a cherished ritual for both of them, the king's stern facade softening slightly as they discussed everything from trade agreements to pack politics over cups of spiced tea. "You see things differently," he told her one evening, Golden Bond humming softly between them as he studied a map she'd annotated with detailed observations about neighboring pack movements. "You notice patterns others miss." On the night of the full moon, the Omega stood atop the palace walls, watching as the pack gathered for their monthly run. The king stood magnificent in his wolf form, black fur gleaming silver in the moonlight as he led his people into the forest. Her heart ached with a familiar emptiness, the inability to shift and join them, still a wound that never quite healed. A commotion at the forest's edge drew her attention. A young wolf, her belly swollen with pregnancy, had collapsed in the grass. The pack members nearby shifted nervously, uncertain how to help, fear of the king's curse making them hesitate. The Omega didn't think twice. She raced down the stairs and across the grounds, her herb pouch already in hand. Years of surviving alone had taught her the healing properties of every plant in these lands. Kneeling beside the laboring wolf, she worked quickly, crushing herbs to ease the birth and whispering encouragement. Hours passed in tense focus. When dawn finally broke, both mother and pup lived, their combined whimpers of life drawing relieved tears from watching pack members. For the first time, the Omega saw genuine respect in their eyes, not fear or politically motivated deference, but true appreciation for her skills. The victory was devastatingly short-lived. The next morning's sun revealed horror. The young mother and her pup were found dead in their den, their bodies marked with strange silvery symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the shadows. The marks matched exactly with descriptions from 2 other recent deaths in neighboring packs, both cases involving pregnant wolves. The king's curse, which had only ever touched his own bloodline, appeared to be spreading like poison through the kingdom. Fear gripped the pack as whispers spread. Was anyone safe? Would every new life be snuffed out before it could truly begin? That night, the king came to her chambers. Gone was the controlled ruler, replaced by a man haunted by the weight of generations of death. He paced before her fireplace, power crackling around him like lightning before a storm. "I was a fool," he said, his voice raw. I thought by choosing you, someone who had survived against all odds, we might break this curse. Instead, I've condemned you, condemned our entire kingdom." He turned to her, and for the first time she saw naked fear in his golden eyes. What if this bond between us has only made things worse? What if I've spread this curse like a disease to every pack within our borders? The Omega rose from her chair, drawn by the pain in his voice. Their golden bond pulsed between them, stronger than ever, defying his dark thoughts with its warm light. "You don't know that," she said softly. "These deaths are different from your family's curse. The marks, the timing, something else is at work here." "But what if you're next?" His voice cracked. "What if I've sentenced you to death by binding you to me?" She reached for his hand, ignoring how he tried to pull away. "Then we'll face it together. I survived 3 years alone in the wilderness. I'm not afraid of a curse." But in the depths of his eyes, she saw his fear remained undiminished. The mighty Alpha King, who had conquered kingdoms and united warring packs, stood before her stripped of his armor, terrified not of death, but of causing it, of being the instrument of destruction for everything and everyone he'd sworn to protect. The Alpha King threw himself into investigating the mysterious deaths with single-minded intensity. For days, he locked himself in his war room with maps and reports, tracking every detail while deliberately maintaining his distance from the Omega Queen. His mate bond ached with each moment of separation, but he convinced himself it was necessary to protect her. The Omega, however, refused to be sidelined. She spent countless hours in the ancient library, poring over dusty tomes and historical records. The elderly keeper helped her access restricted texts, ones that spoke of old magic and forgotten pack laws. With each passing day, patterns began emerging in her research, patterns that seemed to follow the phases of the moon. Their paths inevitably collided one stormy evening in his study. Lightning flashed through the windows as she burst in, clutching a weathered manuscript. "You can't keep shutting me out," she declared, her voice steady despite his intimidating presence. "I've found something important." The king stood from his desk, power rolling off him in waves. "I told you to stay away from this investigation." "And I'm not some fragile flower to be protected?" She shot back. "I'm your queen, whether you like it or not." "A position I'm beginning to regret giving you," he growled, though the golden bond between them pulsed with the lie. She stepped closer, unflinching. "Really? Then why does our bond grow stronger every day? Why do you avoid me if you regret choosing me?" The tension between them crackled like the lightning outside. They stood mere inches apart now, both breathing heavily, neither willing to back down. "Because I can't lose you too!" he roared, his control finally snapping. "Everyone I've ever—" He cut himself off, turning away. But the Omega grabbed his arm, forcing him to face her. "You won't lose me. I'm stronger than you think." Their eyes locked, and something electric passed between them. The king moved first, or maybe they both did. It didn't matter. Their lips crashed together with the force of a storm breaking. The golden bond exploded with light, bathing the entire study in its warm glow as years of loneliness and need poured out of them both. This wasn't the clinical mating of their wedding night. This was raw, passionate, desperate. His hands tangled in her hair as hers clutched at his shoulders. They stumbled backward until she hit his desk, papers scattering unnoticed to the floor. Their bond sang between them, urging them closer, deeper, more. The king lifted her onto the desk, his touch reverent now despite its urgency. "Tell me to stop," he whispered against her throat. "Never," she breathed, pulling him closer. They came together like thunder and lightning, like moon and tide, like two pieces of a whole finally finding their match. The golden bond wove around them, through them, binding them together in ways that went beyond the physical. This was a true mating, heart, body, and soul entwined until neither knew where one ended and the other began. Later, they lay tangled together on the fur rug before the fire, their bond humming contentedly between them. The Omega traced lazy patterns on his chest as she shared her discoveries. "The deaths all occurred during specific lunar phases," she explained, "and not just any phases, ones that correspond to ancient ritual dates in pack history." The king's fingers stilled in her hair. "That matches what I found. every wolf killed had bloodlines tracing back to the original 5 founding packs. She propped herself up on an elbow, eyes wide. Someone's targeting specific bloodlines? But why? Power, perhaps. The oldest bloodlines carry the strongest magic. He sat up, pulling her with him. Show me your research. Together, they spread their findings on the floor, their naked bodies brushing as they worked. The intimacy of the moment, not just physical, but the meeting of minds and purpose, deepened their connection with every passing minute. As dawn's first light crept through the windows, they had their answer. The deaths weren't random, nor were they caused by the king's curse spreading. Someone was systematically eliminating wolves with specific ancient bloodlines, following a ritual pattern tied to the moon's phases. The king looked at his mate with new eyes, seeing not just the clever survivor he'd married, but a true partner in every sense. She met his gaze steadily, their bond now a solid, unshakable thing between them. Morning found them truly mated, their bodies, minds, and hearts aligned in perfect harmony. The arrangement they'd begun with had transformed into something neither had expected, but both now desperately needed. The morning sickness hit just as dawn broke over the palace grounds. The Omega Queen barely made it to her washroom before emptying her stomach. This was the 3rd day in a row, and she could no longer deny what it meant. Her hands trembled as she pressed them against her still flat belly, feeling the tiny spark of life growing within. When she told the king that evening, his reaction was everything she'd hoped for and everything she'd feared. Joy blazed through their bond like sunlight, his arms wrapping around her with fierce protectiveness. But she felt the undercurrent of terror beneath his happiness, the memory of every lost heir haunting his eyes. "I will not lose you," he vowed, his voice rough with emotion. "Either of you." Within hours, he'd assigned a rotating guard detail to shadow her every move. Warriors tracked her steps through the palace halls, stood watch outside her chambers, even monitored her beloved library visits. The Omega understood his fear, but the constant surveillance made her feel like a prisoner rather than a queen. "I can't breathe with them hovering," she complained to Marcus one afternoon, 6 weeks into her pregnancy. The beta had become a trusted friend, one who treated her with respect rather than suspicion. "The king fears for you both," Marcus replied diplomatically. "These are dangerous times." She knew he was right, but the restrictions grew more suffocating with each passing day. Strange changes were happening to her body beyond the usual pregnancy symptoms. Her dreams were filled with ancient wolves running under long-ago moons, speaking in languages she somehow understood upon waking. Sometimes, catching her reflection in mirrors, she swore her skin shimmered with an inner light, like moonbeams trapped beneath the surface. The pack gathering that evening should have been a celebration. Wolves from across the kingdom had come to pay respects to their pregnant queen, bringing gifts and good wishes. The great hall buzzed with energy as pack members mingled, sharing food and news. But everything changed when the messenger burst through the doors, blood staining his traveling clothes. "My king!" he gasped, falling to his knees. "The Shadow Pack! They've returned!" Our border patrol spotted them at the northern edge of the territory. The hall erupted in chaos. The Shadow Pack had been a plague upon the kingdoms decades ago, practicing dark magic and stealing cubs before they were supposedly destroyed. Their return sent waves of fear through the assembled wolves. The king's roar cut through the panic. "To arms!" he commanded, his alpha power washing over the crowd. "Marcus, organize the defensive lines. Get word to our allies." His eyes found the Omega across the room, their bond humming with shared concern. Before he could reach her side, the elderly librarian appeared at her elbow. "My queen," the old woman whispered urgently, "I must speak with you about your mother." The Omega's heart stuttered. "My mother? But she died when I was young." "There's so much you don't know," the librarian said. "Your mother, she was protecting you. The secret she died keeping." Warning howls shattered the night, cutting off the librarian's words. The palace walls trembled as explosions rocked the grounds. Shadow wolves, their fur dark as night and eyes gleaming with unnatural power, poured through the breached defenses. "Find the queen!" a harsh voice commanded. "She carries what we need!" The king fought his way toward her through the melee, but a fresh wave of attackers drove them further apart. "Run!" he shouted through their bond. "I'll find you!" Marcus appeared at her side, sword drawn. "This way, my queen!" He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward a hidden passage behind the throne. The last thing she saw before the panel closed was her mate surrounded by shadow-dark wolves, his eyes burning with rage and desperation. They fled through the secret tunnels, the sounds of battle muffled but still terrifying above them. The Omega's hand pressed protectively over her stomach as they ran, her mind racing. What did the Shadow Pack want with her child? What secret had her mother died protecting? And most importantly, would she ever see her mate again? Marcus led her deeper into the darkness, away from everything she'd come to love, while overhead, her home fell to chaos and shadow. Through winding stone passages, Marcus guided the Omega Queen deeper beneath the palace. Their footsteps echoed off ancient walls as distant sounds of battle filtered down from above. Her heart ached for her mate, but something else was stirring within her, a power she'd never felt before, building like moonlight in her veins. "Left," she said suddenly, the word leaving her lips before she could think. Her eyes began to glow with a silvery light, illuminating the darkness around them. Marcus stopped, studying her with knowing eyes. "You can sense the old paths, can't you?" I don't know how, but yes." She pressed a hand against the cold stone wall, feeling energy pulse beneath her fingers. "These tunnels, they're calling to me." "There's something you need to know," Marcus said, his voice grave. "Since the day you arrived, I've been investigating your past. Not out of mistrust, but because I suspected what you truly were." A particularly loud explosion shook dust from the ceiling, urging them forward. As they ran, Marcus continued, "Your original pack didn't reject you for being weak. They feared you. You're the last of the lunar bloodline, wolves who could channel moon magic directly." The Omega stumbled, memories flooding back. The strange looks from pack elders, the bitter herbs they'd forced her to drink since childhood, the way they'd kept her isolated during full moons. "They weren't trying to help me shift," she whispered. "They were stopping it from happening." "Someone ordered your power suppressed?" Marcus confirmed. "Someone who knew what you might become and feared it enough to have you cast out rather than risk your awakening." Above them, the king's roar of fury shook the very foundations. Through their bond, she felt his desperate rage as he fought to reach them, tearing through shadow wolves with unprecedented ferocity. Yet, something about the enemy's movements felt calculated, coordinated, as if they knew exactly where to strike. "Here," the Omega said, drawn to a narrow passage that seemed to pulse with ancient energy. "We need to go this way." The tunnel opened into a vast circular chamber supported by towering pillars of moonstone. The crystals gleamed with inner light, responding to her presence. Circular runes carved into the floor formed patterns she somehow recognized, training grounds where her ancestors had once learned to harness their gifts. "The sanctuary of the lunar wolves," Marcus breathed. "It's been lost for generations." Pain suddenly ripped through the Omega's body, driving her to her knees. The moonstone pillars flared brilliantly, their light pouring into her as years of suppression finally shattered. Her bones cracked and reformed, her skin burning as if touched by starfire. "Marcus," she gasped through gritted teeth, "what's happening to me?" "Your true transformation," he said, keeping respectful distance. "The herbs they fed you didn't just prevent shifting, they locked away your entire heritage. Now it's breaking free." The agony was beyond anything she'd imagined, but underneath it ran a current of rightness, of coming home to herself at last. Her body glowed from within, silver light pouring from her eyes and skin as the change took her. When it finished, she stood nearly twice the size of a normal wolf, her fur shimmering like moonlight on water. A crown of pure lunar energy circled her head, casting shadows that danced across the ancient stones. Power thrummed through her body, raw and wild yet somehow familiar. The birthright that had been denied her for so long. Marcus dropped to one knee, head bowed. "The last lunar wolf," he said softly. "The bloodline returns at last." Through new eyes, she saw the world differently, layers of magic and meaning previously hidden now clear as daylight. She understood why she'd been feared, why someone had gone to such lengths to keep her power bound. But there would be time for those answers later. Right now, her mate was fighting for their lives above, and she finally had the strength to fight beside him. The massive silver wolf threw back her head and howled, the sound ringing with ancient power. The moonstone pillars resonated in response, their light building to a crescendo that illuminated every corner of the forgotten sanctuary. The sanctuary's crystalline walls trembled as heavy footsteps approached. The king burst through the passage, his clothes torn and bloodied from battle. He froze at the threshold, golden eyes widening as he beheld his mate's true form. The massive silver wolf stood proudly among the moonstone pillars, her fur rippling with ethereal light. The crown of lunar energy above her head cast dancing shadows across the ancient chamber. Through their bond, he felt her power thrumming like a storm contained in flesh and bone. "Magnificent," he breathed, moving closer with reverent steps. All this time, the Omega padded forward, pressing her muzzle against his chest. Instantly, his wounds began to heal, silver light seeping into torn flesh and knitting it whole. Images flashed through her mind, prophecies and possibilities, the threads of past and future weaving together with sudden clarity. She saw the truth of the curse that had haunted his bloodline, saw the shadow of betrayal lurking in their own halls. Before she could warn him, a slow clap echoed through the chamber. "How touching!" came a familiar voice dripping with contempt. The beast and her king, reunited at last. Matthias emerged from another passage, flanked by shadow wolves. The king's trusted advisor, his own half-brother, wore a smile that never reached his eyes. "Brother," the king snarled, positioning himself between Matthias and his mate. "What is the meaning of this?" "Brother," Matthias spat the word like poison. "Always the legitimate heir, always the true alpha. Did you never wonder why your bloodline was cursed? Why no heir survived? Who had the most to gain from your failure?" Understanding dawned in the king's eyes. "You, all this time?" "I orchestrated everything," Matthias declared, pacing the edge of the chamber. "I arranged for her pack to suppress her powers, to cast her out. I've been systematically eliminating the old bloodlines, gathering their power, and now—" His gaze fixed hungrily on the Omega. "Now I'll claim the greatest prize of all." Marcus stepped forward, sword drawn. "You're mad with power, Matthias?" "Mad? I'm brilliant," Matthias laughed. "Do you know what happens when you kill a lunar wolf carrying new life? Their combined power transfers to the killer. Imagine it, the strength of an ancient bloodline and an unborn royal heir, all mine for the taking." The king roared with rage, launching himself at his half-brother. Shadow wolves poured into the chamber from every entrance. Marcus fought brilliantly, his blade a silver arc in the chaos, but they were desperately outnumbered. The Omega felt the pull of the secret passages, knew she could escape through paths only she could sense. Her instinct screamed to protect their unborn child, to flee while she had the chance. But through their bond, she felt her mate's pain as a shadow wolf's claws found their mark. The king fell to one knee, blood streaming from a deep wound. Marcus was surrounded, fighting desperately against overwhelming odds. Matthias approached with a silver dagger, triumph in his eyes. In that moment, the Omega made her choice: love over safety, pack over self. With a howl that shook the very foundations of the sanctuary, she unleashed the full fury of her heritage. Moonlight exploded from her form in waves of pure power. Shadow wolves were thrown back, their dark magic shattering under the onslaught of lunar energy. The moonstone pillars resonated with her call, amplifying her strength until the chamber blazed like daylight. Matthias screamed in rage and pain as his carefully gathered power was stripped away. The king seized his moment, tackling his half-brother to the ground. Marcus's sword flashed, scattering the remaining shadow wolves. But the display of power had cost her dearly. The Omega felt something tear inside her, a sharp pain that had nothing to do with battle. Her massive form wavered, the silver light flickering like a candle in the wind. She collapsed, shifting back to human form as consciousness slipped away. The last thing she heard was her mate's desperate cry as he caught her falling body. Through their bond, she felt his terror, not for himself, but for their child, whose life now hung by the thinnest of threads. Through the haze of fever dreams, the Omega drifted between worlds. Her physical body lay still in the royal chambers, while her spirit wandered paths unseen by mortal eyes. Moonlight seemed to flow like water here, pooling in silver streams that whispered ancient secrets. The king hadn't moved from her bedside in 3 days. His large frame was hunched with exhaustion as he gripped her hand, channeling his strength through their bond. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, his usual commanding presence diminished by fear and fatigue. "Her temperature rises," the healer murmured, pressing a cool cloth to the Omega's forehead. "And the child's heartbeat grows weaker." Marcus appeared in the doorway, his face grim. "My king, the Shadow Pack masses at our borders. Our scouts report Matthias leads them personally." The king barely acknowledged him, his focus entirely on his mate's pale face. "Handle it," he growled. "The pack needs guidance," Marcus pressed gently. "They look to their alpha, especially now." "Their queen is dying," the king's voice cracked. "Nothing else matters?" In the spirit realm, the Omega wandered through misty corridors of memory and prophecy. Ghostly figures emerged from the silvery haze, wolves of impossible size and beauty, their fur shimmering with starlight. Her ancestors, the great lunar wolves of legend. "Welcome, daughter," a majestic white wolf stepped forward. "We have waited long for you to find your way here." "Am I dying?" the Omega asked. "That depends on the choice you make," another ancestor replied. "You stand at a crossroads meant for you since before your birth." The spirits circled her, their forms shifting between wolf and human. "Our bloodline was never meant to rule alone," they revealed. "We were created to unite, to bring balance to all wolves through shared power." Images flashed through her mind, centuries of history unfolding like pages in a book. She saw the curse being cast on the king's line by those who feared the prophecy of unified leadership. They had known that someday, a lunar wolf would mate with a true alpha, creating a power greater than either bloodline alone. "The choice before you is this," the white wolf said. "Accept your full heritage now and risk both your life and your child's in the surge of power, or surrender your abilities entirely, saving the baby but leaving your pack defenseless against the darkness that comes." The Omega felt the truth of their words in her bones, but as she considered their options, she sensed another possibility, one born from her unique perspective as both outcast and queen. "There is another way," she said slowly. "Not dominance or surrender, but integration." Through her bond with the king, she had experienced how two spirits could work in harmony. Even now, she felt his strength flowing into her, keeping her tethered to life. What if that connection could be expanded, evolved into something entirely new? In the physical world, Marcus organized the remaining loyal wolves, fortifying their defenses while trying to maintain crumbling morale. The pack felt their queen's fading life like a physical wound. Without her quiet wisdom tempering their king's fierce nature, the balance they'd barely begun to achieve was slipping away. The Omega walked deeper into the spirit realm, her ancestors following with growing interest as she explored her theory. She found the threads of power that connected all wolves, pack bonds, mate bonds, the very essence of their nature. Instead of trying to control these forces, she learned to weave them together, creating channels for strength to flow freely between all. "This has never been attempted," her ancestors warned, "to merge alpha strength with lunar magic in this way." "Because everyone sought to rule," the Omega replied. "I learned survival as a rogue, leadership as a queen, and love as a mate. Power isn't about control, it's about connection." Beyond the palace walls, Matthias gathered his forces for what he believed would be his final victory. His spies reported the queen near death, the king lost in grief, the pack fracturing under pressure. He didn't understand that with every moment she spent walking the spirit paths, the Omega was learning to transcend the very boundaries he fought to maintain. In her unconscious state, she began the delicate work of transformation. Through their bond, she drew not just on her mate's strength, but on his very essence, his leadership, his courage, his unwavering loyalty to those under his protection. She wove these qualities together with her own gifts, creating something entirely new, a power meant to unite rather than divide, to heal rather than harm. The Omega's eyes fluttered open, consciousness returning like moonlight breaking through clouds. Her body felt different, lighter, yet more grounded, as if she'd finally found her center after years of imbalance. The power flowing through her veins wasn't the raw force of a pure lunar wolf, nor was it the standard strength of a regular wolf. Instead, it was a perfect fusion of both. The king sat beside her, his massive frame bent forward as he clutched her hand. When their eyes met, their bond blazed visible in the air between them, his deep crimson energy weaving with her silver light in an intricate dance. "The baby?" she whispered, one hand moving protectively to her stomach. "Still with us," he answered, voice rough with relief, growing stronger by the hour, just like its mother. Their moment of peace shattered as Marcus burst through the door. "They're coming. Matthias leads the charge himself. They'll reach our walls by dawn." The Omega pushed herself up, ignoring the king's protective growl. "Help me stand," she commanded. "There's something I learned while walking the spirit paths, something that changes everything." As she got to her feet, she felt the precious flutter of her child, their miracle baby who carried the same balanced power now flowing through her veins. The pregnancy remained delicate, but she sensed new stability there, a resilience born from the merged bloodlines. "Every wolf in this kingdom," she announced to the gathered pack leaders, "carries traces of the original bloodlines. They've just been dormant, suppressed by generations of rigid hierarchy and fear." The king's eyes widened as he grasped her meaning. "You're suggesting we could awaken those powers," she finished, "not through force or dominance, but through unity. Your authority as Alpha combined with my lunar gifts, we can help them remember who they truly are." Outside, war horns blared their warning. Matthias's forces approached, their numbers overwhelming, but the Omega smiled, causing several pack members to step back in surprise. The golden light of her power merged with the king's crimson strength, filling the great hall. "Trust me," she said softly, extending her hands. The king took one hand, Marcus the other. The effect was immediate and stunning. Power surged through the room like a tidal wave, but instead of drowning them, it illuminated forgotten pathways in their blood. The transformation rippled outward in a cascade of awakening. Sarah, their gentlest healer, gasped as offensive magic crackled at her fingertips. Warriors who'd relied purely on physical strength suddenly staggered as visions of enemy movements filled their minds. Most shocking of all, the Omega wolves at the back of the room straightened as new power flooded their bodies, their strength now matching any alphas. The king watched in amazement as his pack transformed. "The old boundaries," he murmured. "They were never real." "Matthias fights to preserve a lie," the Omega replied. "He believes power must be hoarded, controlled. But true strength comes from unity." They rushed to the battlements as dawn broke. Matthias's forces were impressive. Hundreds of shadow wolves bred for combat, all believing in their pure blood superiority. But they faced an army unlike anything seen before in wolf history. Traditional battle lines blurred as healers charged forward. Their defensive magic turned to devastating effect. Warrior wolves moved with prophetic precision, anticipating every enemy strike. Former Omegas fought with newfound power, their previous status meaningless in the face of their awakened abilities. The tide turned dramatically. Matthias's forces, expecting to crush a weakened opponent, found themselves facing powers they'd never imagined. Their rigid tactics fell apart against an enemy that defied all traditional categories. But Matthias had prepared a final, cruel strategy. As his forces retreated in disarray, a messenger brought devastating news. He'd taken the elderly librarian hostage, the keeper of their most ancient knowledge. "Send your pregnant queen to face me in single combat," his message declared, "or watch me tear out the throat of the last keeper of the old wisdom." The king snarled, his protective instincts warring with strategic necessity. But the Omega placed a calming hand on his arm, her eyes clear and determined. "He still thinks in the old ways," she said. "He sees my pregnancy as weakness, my transformed nature as diluted power. Let him learn how wrong he is." The bond between them pulsed with shared strength and understanding. This wasn't just about saving the librarian or defeating Matthias. It was about finally breaking the chains of ancient prejudice that had bound their kind for too long. The ancient amphitheater stood silent in the morning mist, its stone tiers bearing witness to centuries of pack law. Now those same weathered seats held hundreds of wolves watching as their pregnant queen faced her greatest challenge. "This is madness," the king growled, his hands gentle on the Omega's shoulders despite his fierce tone. "There must be another way." She touched his cheek, their bond humming with shared strength. "Sometimes the old ways must be broken through ancient channels. Let me show them all what true power looks like." Matthias waited in the fighting circle, his massive black form radiating cruel confidence. The elderly librarian knelt beside him, bound but dignified. As the Omega descended the stone steps, whispers rippled through the crowd, some concerned for her safety, others wondering if pregnancy had addled her mind. "Release her," the Omega commanded, indicating the librarian. "You have your challenge. You don't need a hostage." Matthias's laugh was cold. "Still giving orders like a true queen? Let's see how regal you are when I tear that abomination from your belly." The king's roar of rage echoed through the amphitheater, but the Omega raised her hand, silencing him. With deliberate care, she removed her outer robe, revealing her swollen stomach. Rather than hiding her pregnancy as a weakness, she displayed it proudly. Matthias struck first, launching himself with deadly precision, but where once she might have tried to match strength with strength, the Omega moved like water, redirecting his momentum. He crashed into empty air as she pivoted aside, her movements displaying a grace that left the audience gasping. "Impossible," Matthias snarled. "No Omega moves like that." "No Omega you allowed to exist," she corrected, flowing through combat forms that blended multiple fighting styles. "Your obsession with dominance blinded you to true strength." He attacked again, more viciously this time, specifically targeting her midsection. The Omega met each strike with calculated defense, using his own force against him. When he overextended, she landed precise blows that spoke of knowledge far beyond traditional Omega training. Their battle became a physical debate, his brutal philosophy of power through supremacy against her demonstration of adaptable strength. Each clash carried the weight of opposing worldviews. Matthias fought to preserve a hierarchy that had elevated him. The Omega fought to break chains that had bound them all. But even transformed, pregnancy took its toll. As the fight stretched on, her movement slowed fractionally. Matthias seized his advantage, landing a punishing blow that sent her staggering. The crowd gasped as he pressed forward, victory gleaming in his eyes. Instead of falling, the Omega reached through her bond with the king. Their connection blazed visible to all, crimson and silver light intertwining. The king's strength poured into her, freely given rather than forcefully taken. This was power through partnership, the very antithesis of Matthias's beliefs. "You still don't understand?" she said, rising steadily. "True strength isn't about standing alone. It's about choosing to stand together." Matthias howled in fury, launching himself in what should have been a killing blow. But in that precise moment, the Omega felt her child move within her for the first time. A strong, decisive kick that sent waves of maternal power coursing through her body. The sensation merged with her mate's strength, creating something entirely new. The blast that erupted from her was neither lunar light nor alpha power, but a perfect fusion of both. It caught Matthias at the apex of his leap, surrounding him in swirling energy. When it faded, he lay human on the stone floor, his wolf form stripped away completely. The silence was absolute as Matthias realized what had happened. He reached desperately for his wolf and found nothing. the ultimate punishment for a wolf who had built his life on dominance, becoming what he had always despised. "Kill me!" he spat, hatred burning in his now purely human eyes. "It's what I would do." The Omega straightened, one hand resting on her active child while the other remained linked with her mate's strength. "Exactly," she said clearly, her voice carrying to every corner of the amphitheater. "And that is why you lost. Your punishment is exile, to live as the Omega you so despised, to learn what true strength means from those you thought beneath you." As guards led the broken Matthias away, the king joined his mate in the fighting circle. Their bond pulsed with shared victory, and something more, the establishment of new precedents, justice tempered with mercy, strength proven through unity rather than destruction. The ancient amphitheater had witnessed countless battles that ended in death, but today, it saw something revolutionary, a victory won through transformation rather than elimination, marking the beginning of a new era in pack law. The winter brought peaceful changes to the kingdom. Moonlight Palace, once a fortress of rigid hierarchy, transformed into a center of innovation and unity. Former Omegas walked its halls with newfound confidence, their wisdom finally recognized and valued. The Omega Queen, her belly now full with child, worked tirelessly beside her mate to reshape centuries of tradition. "These laws must reflect what we've learned," she said one evening, reviewing scrolls in their shared study. The king watched her with quiet pride as she marked passages for revision. Every wolf has value beyond their rank. Their legendary bond had become living proof of this philosophy. Where once arranged matings maintained power structures, their chosen love demonstrated something profound. That genuine connection transcended old hierarchies. Wolves throughout the kingdom whispered about the visible golden light that surrounded them when they worked as one. The changes rippled through every aspect of pack life. Former alphas learned healing arts from Omega herbalists. Warriors trained alongside scholars, combining battle tactics with ancient wisdom. The kingdom flourished under this balanced approach, growing stronger through unity rather than force. As the winter solstice approached, the queen's time drew near. The palace buzzed with excitement. This child would be the firstborn of both lunar and alpha bloodlines. But beneath the celebration ran currents of concern. The Omega's pregnancy had grown increasingly difficult as her due date approached. The first contractions began as aurora lights painted the night sky in sheets of green and gold. The king paced outside the birthing chamber until his mate's pained cry drew him rushing to her side. Their bond flared with shared agony as another contraction racked her body. "Something's wrong," the elderly healer muttered, consulting ancient texts with trembling hands. "The child, its power is too great." The king gripped his mate's hand as she struggled to breathe. "What do you mean?" "There were warnings in the old scrolls," the healer explained. "Lunar wolves mated only within their bloodline for this reason. The combined heritage, it's too much for a normal birth." The Omega cried out again, her skin flickering with unstable lunar light. The child's dual nature fought within her, alpha strength warring with lunar magic. Each contraction threatened to tear her apart from within. The king felt her agony through their bond and faced an impossible choice. He could channel his strength to protect her, but doing so might overwhelm their child's developing powers. Or he could hold back, preserving the heir but risking losing his mate, his heart, his equal, his chosen love. "Save the baby," the Omega gasped, reading his torment. But before he could decide, the chamber doors burst open. Marcus led a procession of pack members, alphas, betas, and omegas alike. "We felt her pain," he said. "The whole pack did. Let us help." The king stared in amazement as hundreds of wolves filled the corridors of Moonlight Palace, all drawn by loyalty rather than command. They offered their strength freely, each in their own way. Healers stepped forward with gentle energy. Warriors extended their endurance. Even those with the smallest sparks of power reached out with willing hearts. "This is what we've been building toward," Marcus said softly. "True pack bonds freely given." The king understood. Taking his mate's hand, he became a conduit for the pack's collective energy. Their bond blazed brighter than ever, but now hundreds of smaller lights joined it, a constellation of support surrounding their queen. The Omega felt the difference immediately. Where before she fought alone against overwhelming power, now she had an entire kingdom's strength supporting her. The aurora lights above the palace intensified, responding to the massive convergence of energy below. Her final push shook the foundations of Moonlight Palace. The assembled pack held their breath as a baby's cry pierced the night, strong and clear, and unlike any sound they'd heard before. The child glowed with the perfect blend of her parents' powers, tiny hands trailing both moonlight and alpha strength. "A daughter," the healer announced, tears in her eyes. Born of chosen love and carried to life by an entire pack's devotion. The king gathered his family close as cheers erupted through the palace. Their bond hummed with exhausted joy, now permanently enriched by the hundreds of freely offered connections that had helped bring their child safely into the world. Outside, the aurora lights danced in celebration, marking this birth as the fulfillment of ancient prophecies, not through force or fate, but through the willing unity of an entire kingdom. The newborn princess defied all expectations from her first breath. As the healer cleaned her tiny form, the child's body shimmered and shifted. One moment a perfect human baby, the next a silver-white wolf pup. The gathered pack gasped in wonder as she changed back and forth with ease, something unheard of in one so young. "Look at her eyes," the king whispered, cradling his daughter close. In both forms, her eyes held an impossible blend, rings of lunar silver surrounding pupils of alpha gold. The Omega reached out to touch her daughter's cheek, feeling the perfect balance of both bloodlines flowing through her tiny form. "She's everything they feared," the Omega said softly. "Power, without the need for dominance. Strength found through balance rather than force." The kingdom erupted into celebration. For 7 days and nights, wolves from every rank and territory came to honor the child who represented their new way of life. The palace halls rang with music and laughter. Even former rivals danced together, old prejudices forgotten in the joy of this new beginning. But on the 7th night, as the moon reached its peak, the Omega felt a familiar stirring in her blood. She stood on the palace balcony, her daughter in her arms, and watched as figures emerged from the shadows of the forest. They moved with an ancient grace, their forms trailing silver light like her own. "They're here," she whispered as the king joined her. Below, 12 wolves approached the palace gates. Unlike the spirits she'd met during her spirit walk, these were flesh and blood, lunar wolves who had survived in secret for generations. The palace guards parted respectfully as the visitors entered the great hall. They shifted to human form, revealing faces marked with luminescent patterns that matched the Omega's own. Their leader, a silver-haired woman with eyes like starlight, stepped forward and bowed. "We felt her birth across the continents," the woman said. "We've waited centuries for this moment, when a child would be born bridging the ancient ways and the new." The king and queen listened intently as their visitors shared 2 messages, one of warning, one of hope. "Other kingdoms watch what you've built here," the silver-haired woman explained. "Your success threatens those who cling to the old hierarchies. Some will try to destroy this new balance before it can spread." But with the warning came unexpected joy. "Your courage in claiming your heritage, in choosing love over tradition," another lunar wolf said to the Omega. "It's inspired others. Hundreds of us, hidden for generations, are ready to emerge. Your daughter's birth proves what we've always known, that true power comes from unity, not separation." The visitors presented gifts, ancient scrolls containing forgotten knowledge, crystals that amplified lunar magic, and most precious of all, their pledge of alliance. "We offer our strength to your cause," the silver-haired woman declared. "The question is, will you keep this paradise small and protected, or help us spread this revolution to all wolf territories?" The king and queen shared a look, their bond humming with shared purpose. No words were needed. They had already chosen this path when they first decided to love despite tradition. True change requires courage, the king announced, and real strength comes from facing challenges, not hiding from them. That very night, they began making plans. Envoys would be chosen, pairs of wolves representing different ranks working together, living proof that unity didn't require uniformity. Their message would be simple but powerful. Strength comes in many forms, and every wolf has value beyond their rank. As the lunar wolves shared their knowledge, and the palace hummed with new purpose, the king and queen stood on their balcony once more. Their daughter slept peacefully in the Omega's arms, shifting occasionally in her dreams. Below them, their kingdom sprawled, no longer divided by rank but united in purpose. The future held uncertainty. Change never came easily, and some would resist. But as they watched the moonlight bathe their lands, hope outweighed fear. Their daughter stirred and opened her dual-colored eyes, a living bridge between past and future. The revolution they'd started here would spread, carried forward on bonds of chosen loyalty and love, rather than forced submission. The Grand Gathering's 5th anniversary transformed the ancient meeting grounds into a living testament of change. Hundreds of packs filled the sprawling valley, their camps no longer segregated by rank, but mixed in celebration of their new way of life. The Omega Queen stood proudly beside her Alpha King on the ceremonial platform, their matching silver-gold bonds shimmering in the evening light. Below them, their 5-year-old daughter played with children from every pack and rank. Her dual-colored eyes sparkled as she shifted effortlessly between forms, leading games that would have been forbidden just years ago. These children would grow up knowing only unity, their future untainted by the rigid hierarchies that once divided their kind. Marcus surveyed the gathering from his position, his reformed guard a perfect reflection of their new world. Omega wolves patrolled alongside alphas, their different strengths complementing each other in ways the old system never imagined. His quiet pride showed in every coordinated movement of his integrated teams. Near the healing tents, Helena worked tirelessly, her previous arrogance replaced by genuine service. Her centers had revolutionized pack medicine, blending traditional treatments with the lunar healing arts she'd learned from the queen. The same wolves who once scorned her now sought her wisdom, and she bore her redemption with grace. As the closing ceremony began, the king stepped forward to share their story. His deep voice carried across the valley, speaking of love that defied tradition and strength found in unity. But amid his words, a shadow of the old world struck. Assassins from supremacist packs launched their attack, their movements betraying months of planning. Their mistake became immediately apparent. Before the royal guard could even move, hundreds of transformed wolves rose as one. Omegas channeled lunar light, former betas unleashed newfound powers, and alphas fought with protective rather than dominant strength. The would-be killers found themselves surrounded by the very unity they'd sought to destroy. The attack ended as quickly as it began, but its message echoed far beyond the gathering. Across all territories, word spread. The age of singular alpha rule had truly ended, replaced by something far stronger: chosen loyalty and shared power. Later that night, in their private chambers, the king knelt before his queen, as he had every anniversary since their mating. They renewed their vows not as ruler and consort, but as equals who'd chosen each other. Their daughter watched with curiosity, her inherited powers already showing signs of surpassing them both. "Mama," she asked, her small face serious, "why do some wolves still fear what we are?" The Omega Queen gathered her daughter close, sharing a loving look with her mate. "Fear fades when love leads, little moon," she answered softly. "And love, true love, always finds a way." Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow, I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.